Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief, and today we're talking about the strategic growth and positioning of CRS. CRS is the content recovery specialist, and they serve our industry on a daily basis. Our guest today is Ashley Taylor. She is the visionary founder of Contents Recovery Specialists, a leading force in the contents restoration space. She has over 20 years of hands-on experience in the industry. She's held nearly every position in both contents and full-service restoration. Her background, combined with her vision and leadership, has been instrumental in CRS's rapid expansion from 50 to over 60 open locations in just 3 years. Without further ado, please welcome Ashley.
Hi, thank you, Kayla.
Yes, thank you for joining me today. I know we have a lot to talk about. I briefly got to meet you in person. We were neighbors at Access, so it was great to get to know you before having the opportunity to interview you. So, kind of as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the strategic growth and positioning of CRS. And just for everybody to understand, 5 to 60 is huge, right? And so it was no easy task, but you guys got it done. So, with your rapid expansion, I know 70 is probably the next goal, right? So what's driving this growth and how are you guys able to prepare and scale correctly?
So I think probably the biggest thing in driving the growth is the demand and the nature of our services in the industry in general. So, um, you know, we've seen a lot of really positive feedback across the country in our different locations, and that's just fueled us to keep going on and keep adding more locations. One of the big things that really has helped us to scale is, we handpick our owners to make sure that they have the same passion and care that I have for contents. It's one of those places that's just kind of hit near and dear to my heart after serving in every facet of restoration. And, we want our locations to have those same exact beliefs and that same exact passion for those. So a lot of them are also multi-unit owners, so they actually service a couple territories under one ownership, which really helps us from a corporate level be able to kind of assist as necessary and, cuts down on some of that clerical work. And, it's a matter of just kind of working with them, having our CRS University for training. We bring everybody to Pittsburgh to our corporate office for training as well. And, we have just a very open dialogue with all of our locations.
And I would definitely say to your point, having the same love and passion at all locations is what really sets you guys apart and makes you guys, at the have a seat at the top of the industry. And I think that also allows expansion really quickly, right? Because like you said, there's owners that have multiple territories, which also is a blessing because you're able to, like you said, cut down on the admin work, but also that the quality of work and customer service is going to be superior, which is huge in this space for all the people that we serve. So I think we got to talk a little bit when I was at Access and we were kind of like, what should we talk about? And I think we kind of talked about all the different spaces that Contents touches, and one of which we talked about carriers and TPAs, right? So, what are the most pressing issues that they're facing, and how is CRS positioned to address these issues or questions with carriers and TPAs?
So really, I mean, probably the biggest one is just the cost of replacement over restoration anymore. I like to tell a little story that, whenever I moved into my new house, my mom bought me a couch as our housewarming gift, and super excited. And we love the couch. We use it on a multiple times a day basis. It's my Saturday and Sunday workspace. And it's kind of one of those things that we became so attached and comfortable with that we wanted to replace it with the same exact couch because it's starting to get older. We've been in the house for quite a few years now. So I went to the furniture store just recently, a couple months ago, and I found the exact couch and I said, this is exactly what I want. And it had actually over doubled in price from 7 years ago till today. Same exact couch, same manufacturer, whole 9 yards. So from an insurance perspective, I'm sure they're looking at the same exact things where, to replace that dining room table is not nearly cost effective as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So, they're sitting down looking at those things. And I think one of the biggest ways that we're positioned to help them is we utilize a lot of technology in our process, from determining total loss versus salvageable. Our digital inventory system, where we're able to actually document everything that comes out of the house with not only like an Excel spreadsheet style inventory, but also a photograph attached to that, and hyperlinked over. And then also from that total loss standpoint, having the digital total loss inventory as well. So that way the homeowner and the insurance adjuster can understand exactly what they're looking at whenever they do have to total loss an item.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think we did talk about the couch when we were at Access, and it's crazy to see how much things change as far as pricing and even like availability, right? I think you're very lucky that you were able to find the same couch because oftentimes they don't even make those couches anymore or whatever the case may be. And so it's extremely important to utilize the tools that you guys have. Also, any data that you guys have, I think helps really make a difference for your customers and those that you serve. Um, so, I think we kind of talked about this as well last time we saw each other, but, I think as an industry, the growing consensus is that contents restoration is the next big thing or the next big shift in our industry. Similar to some other trends that we've seen in the past. How is CRS adapting to lead in this space?
So I think one of the biggest things is, our focus on alignment with carrier expectations and TPA expectations. So, if we kind of go back to that digital inventory side of things, the way we structure our Xactimate or Symbility estimates is on a buy box basis versus doing them time and material. It really creates a clear picture for the insurance carrier as well as the homeowner of, exactly what was done, how it was charged for, and what was received out of that process. So I think one of the biggest or the two biggest things is number one, getting that nationwide coverage for the insurance carriers to be able to make that full switch over. And then secondly, aligning yourselves with what they need in the industry. Here at Pittsburgh, we belong to quite a few TPAs and quite a few work with quite a few carriers. And so we're able to see like a lot of their guidelines. And, the general consensus is that, they like that buy box estimating process. And with our efficiencies, it allows us to work within that space pretty well.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, do you know what maybe took so long for contents to kind of come to the forefront? I mean, contents has always been a thing, but I feel like now more and more we hear about contents and making sure that we're doing things right and, cleaning or restoring the contents that we can, rather than replacing them. I've been in the industry for 10 years and I've always known about contents, but I definitely will say in the last like 3 to maybe 5 years, it's really picked up. Do you know what caused that by chance?
I think it's a mixture of homeowner satisfaction. So one of the stories I like to tell is, or thought processes to think about is when you move out of your house, what's the one thing you take with you? All of your belongings. When you go from an apartment to a house to an apartment, that's the constant throughout all of those moves in your life is you take your belongings. Because ultimately, yeah, your structure is a house and it has the memories and everything involved in it. But it's really the items whenever you start hanging them on your wall and setting up your bathroom and your bedroom and everything is really what turns that house into a home. So I think part of it is that and just the general want of people to keep their stuff and preserve those memories. And then the second part of it, I believe, is especially since COVID, is the driving cost of goods everywhere across the board. When I started in the industry 20 years ago, it probably was cheaper just to replace it all than it was to restore it. But that has taken a major turn as of late, and I only really foresee it kind of getting worse from here.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that your emphasis on both of those things are actually really huge. I think we're all sitting in the consumer seat, right? We all have moved. We all have even stuff that's in your office, right? Like I think you learn just like the sentimental and emotional attachment to your things. And, like you said, yes, you make memories in a home, but oftentimes you're able to take things that were based around those memories. So it's lasting and it's in your new space. So I think that's also really huge. And cost does have a lot to do with it. I'm interested to see what, the future holds, because this is still a big deal. And I think it's kind of in the beginning stages. So we'll see where it takes us in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, so I think this is a burning um, question in the space, right? So everybody in the space tries to be everything to everyone sometimes, right? Depending on where you are geographically, right? If you're a small town, usually you try and do everything and offer all the things and all the services. So CRS embraces like your specialty service, right? If you will. So why do you believe having a niche is not only okay, but it's essential to what you do?
I think a lot of that comes from my background in restoration. I've done everything from mitigation technician to hang drywall to painting, basically wherever I was needed for prior companies that I'd worked with. And it's a lot, it's a lot to take on rebuilding a structure and repairing a structure, especially because you take into account, some homes have plaster, some have drywall, some have this, some have that. Different complexity of repairs and things. When you take the addition of contents on top of that, it just adds a whole extra layer to that process. Some furniture's upholstered, some furniture's varnished shellac, some has a water-based shellac, and some of it's not made of wood at all, and it's pressed wood. It just all depends on the items, but you figure if you sit back and you look at all of the different things that you have in your house, from electronics to artwork to just your general furniture, there's a lot to take into consideration there. So, you're adding all of that extra on top of there. And I think that it really helps whenever you're able to kind of hone in on, okay, I'm just going to restore these things. A lot of it comes with efficiency. Whenever you start working at a hamburger restaurant, your first hamburger you make is probably pretty slow. And then as you've made your 5,000th hamburger, now all of a sudden, you're quick at it, you're able to be efficient, you learn little tips and tricks. Same thing goes for us. So I think it's really been super essential, and it's going to continue to be essential from, those standpoints.
Yeah, and I would definitely say to your point, the furniture and just everything, pictures, documentation, electronics. We have a ton of that in all of our spaces. And I mean, when we get into commercial spaces, that's just multiplied by so much, right? And so if you're able to just focus on your craft, if you will, it also makes the process a little bit easier because there's a lot of moving parts in any restoration project. And so for you guys to be able to specialize in content specifically, you're able to master that art and craft and, give your customers the satisfaction and the service that they deserve. Um, so looking ahead, what does the future of the restoration industry look like to you? And how will CRS continue to evolve to meet the needs for both clients and your partners that you work with?
So I think probably the biggest thing is going to be transparency with customers, the insureds, whether it be a homeowner or a business. We were talking the other day, and I had ordered food on a delivery app, and I'm able to like look at the app, and I can see that they're still at the store. Then I see when they're on their way to our house, and it just that's what we've come to expect as human beings anymore. Amazon started that with the 2-day Prime delivery. Things have to be quicker, things have to move faster. And I've spent quite a lot of time explaining to homeowners, well, we don't get to prepare for you to have, a loss. And it's something that, we're always working on our toes, but it takes time, whenever it comes down to it. But I think that more and more the industry is going to demand that transparency of exactly what's going on when. And I feel that, CRS will always maintain the focus of bringing technology in when it makes sense, when it makes our jobs more efficient. But we will, sit down and look at those kinds of processes and be able to figure out, again, as a homeowner thinking about somebody coming in and taking all of my belongings from my house and putting it in a warehouse, X amount of miles or minutes away from me, that's kind of a scary concept for them sometimes. So, that's where the digital inventory and, being able to track jobs and things come into play, that we're able to, kind of help ease some of that concern of theirs and, guide them through the process to make it a lot easier for them. And I think the carriers and the TPAs are really going to be looking more and more to that as well, just to provide an overall better customer experience.
Yeah, and to your point, we're very spoiled with instant gratification these days. So, I would definitely say in our space, we do utilize technology, but like you said, it has to make sense, right? The last thing we want to do is roll something out and it not work properly, because then that leads to staff frustration, customer frustration, and then, when there's one complaint, many follow, unfortunately. And so, I think that's really important. Yes, we'll probably get to that instant gratification in the future. But right now, like you said, you have to utilize what works best for you and your team and also for customers, right? Because I think we all know that all of our customers are in different stages in life, and some people like technology and some don't. But I will definitely say utilizing it for like inventory purposes or, documentation, I think it definitely makes sense. One day we'll probably have, some fun tracking elements and, who knows, QR codes. I'm sure they're already implemented. But I think because of the situation when we're handling people's livelihood and even their, memories, why add an extra layer until it's perfected, right? Let's make sure it's perfect before we launch that. Um, how has it been, with the last couple of years with the hurricanes and then we had fires right back to back? Have you guys seen any shifts that might help shape the future of the space?
So I think a lot of it kind of boils down to just capacity in general. We're seeing a lot of restoration companies lean on us as an extra extension of them to be able to help. It's one of the things, we talk about with our restoration partners is, you know, your mitigators are busy doing mitigation back to back to back, and then you've got your recon guys coming in to do all of the restoration, and sometimes there just aren't enough hours in the day. So both on a natural disaster side as well as just an everyday side, it's nice to have a partner that you can rely on to, help with those little tasks of packing up all the belongings, which can be extremely time consuming in certain instances. So, we've gotten a lot of really, really positive feedback across the nation that they have a solution like this now. And it's not just a matter of, either throwing it all in the dumpster or, figuring out a way to make ends meet.
Yeah, and I will definitely say when you have a focus and a collaboration that's like an extension of your internal team, it makes all the difference, right? Everybody specializes in their own little avenue, right? You guys are contents, like you said, there's recon and there's MIT, so there's opportunity to have a very seamless process where specific people are focusing on their specialty. So the process moves a lot faster, right? Because I think to your point, there's so much in every project. And, talking about, yeah, we have to pack everything out and then, all of these things. It's like, wow, if you were to take a look at like any room that you're in, right? And then multiply that by a whole house or a business, it's like, yeah, that takes time, right? Because there's things that are breakable. There's things that can't be laid face down. There's all of these things. And so it's not just a pack out, right? There's an art and a method to all of the madness. And I think that's extremely important for people listening to utilize people like your guys' selves, because you take a lot of weight off of their shoulders and allow them to focus on the piece that they have mastered. Um, so I don't have any other questions. Is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation? I know it's a huge task to cover it all, but I think we covered some key pieces in contents just as a whole. But do you have anything else to add?
I think probably the biggest thing is like you said, utilizing those partnerships and being able to, extend yourself and really kind of hone in and let your employees focus on, what they applied for in the beginning. One of the recent conferences I was at, they said that restoration has a 66% burnout rate of employees, which is extremely believable. I've been there myself as well. You know, you can only do 2 o'clock mornings so often before you start to get very tired. So, you know, in that, you know, where you can lessen that burden a little bit, or even just create the ability to process more jobs or help more homeowners and more business owners, you know, utilize those services, whether it be in textiles or contents or electronics or, you know, any other kind of specialty area.
Yeah, that's so true. And to your point, I think we've all experienced burnout, right? 2 o'clock morning, 7 day work weeks. You know, you can only do it for so long. At the end of the day, we are human, and leveraging the collaboration is huge, right? Leveraging your partnerships can make a huge difference, not just in, the catastrophes, but just everyday situations, right? We know that, when it rains, it pours, whether it's, burst pipes or whatever the case may be, there's going to be instances where you need to leverage those partnerships. I would really love to thank you for joining me today. I think we covered a ton, and I look forward to having you on again. And for all of you listening, as always, we will see you on the next Ask the Expert. Take care.